Welcome, everybody, to ESPN Esports on Twitch. This is the ESPN Valorant Show. Every single Thursday, we dive into all things Valorant. Roster news, signings, updates to the game, and we have a lot to dive into this week. You may or may not heard, we have a release date, and it's a lot sooner than we had all expected. Arda, Tyler, Emily with you. Tyler, you actually had a chance to speak with the developers, the executive producer. That article is up right now at espn.com/esports. In advance of this major announcement, we heard that June 2nd is going to be the release date. What did you take away? You talked to them for a while. What did you take away from the conversation?
Yeah, so, let's just be transparent here. I've known about the June 2nd release date for about a month, and as we've gotten closer to it, I was like, at first, I was like, okay, this is going to be soon, but, I think it'll be fine. The game's doing really well, Twitch viewers are great, player base seems really engaged, they're fixing issues really quickly, and then as we've gotten closer to the date, I've kind of been a bit more worried, where it's like, even I've had some FPS drops, I've been vanguarded, which is now a verbiage, a term that's being used in games when a player disconnects because of Vanguard kicking them out and needing to restart your computer before you can play it again. So I went to this interview with Joseph Ziegler and Anna Donlin, the two lead developers on Valorant, and I was pretty forefront and very upfront about it. I was like, why June 2nd? Like, this game felt like you could have waited until July, maybe even August. The game's great. I bought a new computer for this game. I play it every day. I talk about it endlessly. I'm watching all the events. I'm watching streams. But it felt soonish. And I think we can all agree it felt soonish because you have people talking about FPS drops and performance issues. And their retort to that was, they want this game to go to the rest of the world. June 2nd was always going to be the release date from the very beginning. They haven't pushed it back. They haven't pushed it forward. And for them, they want a starting point because this is a game that is going to continuously evolve throughout. This isn't like The Last of Us Part 2 where when that's shipped, if there's something majorly wrong with the game, that ruins everything, right? Like, it's not easy to fix that game. Where in Valorant, they expect to be fixing and tinkering with this game for the next decade plus. So they want a start point where if there's FPS issues, which they are working on and they want to have fixed by launch, they will be continuously and aggressively working on it. This team has over 100 developers. I believe it's close to 200. So this isn't like Counter-Strike where you have 3 developers working on CSGO at a single time. So for them, they just want a start point to start everything going because they want to get it into the hands of as many people as possible so they can fix these problems when they prop up. Oceania is getting the game. Japan is getting a server. Hong Kong's getting a server. Most of APAC is getting a server. Really, the only major region that's not getting a server on June 2nd is China, and that's mostly due to it needing to be regulated by the government. Mm-hmm. Tencent, obviously, owns Riot. They're huge in China. They want this game to be huge in China, so it will come out in China and they will push it big, but it won't be out for June 2nd.
Safe to say that it will come at some point in China.
Oh, obviously. I would be surprised.
I think the important thing to stress here, just as someone who follows Chinese esports, is that it's something that happens really frequently. It's why League of Legends sometimes is a patch behind in China because they have to get it approved. And to Tyler's point, this is not a slight against China. No. They're just trying to get it through as soon as possible. Yeah. And the Tencent will be able to get it through, for sure.
So we're going to get a new game mode. We're going to get a new agent. We've seen the agent's foot in a graphic. We also are going to get new skins. So there's going to be a lot, and you can see it right there on the very right of that graphic there. So we are getting some new additions.
Yes.
At launch itself, Emily. Why don't is that enough in your opinion? I guess there's going to be a lot of new players who haven't played this game. They aren't part of closed beta. For someone who has played the game as much as we have, what do you think of the offering going into launch?
I think it's it's pretty exciting, honestly. So at first, I still have some of the same reservations that Tyler had mentioned, right? Where this is a really quick launch date. To the point we were just talking about, they could have held off until they could get the game through in China and done like a full like bang huge blowout release with every major region, right? But I don't mind the fact that they're going off of the immediate success that they've already seen. Through, and I know we're gonna bring this up in a bit, but like I think the drop system worked really, really well to launch this game, to get people super excited about it in an organic way that didn't involve money changing hands, which is actually like really impressive. So and I don't blame them for wanting to launch this as quickly as possible. So while I guess like the thought process is like people would think maybe there's not enough, this is still going to seem a lot like a beta. I think it will to some people, especially people who have been like spamming the game. But to that point, I also think that like we say this on the show every week, or I say it on the show every week. I feel like a broken record. I think we haven't even seen the beginning of like the depth of what you can do with this game strategically. I think the only like major criticism that I have as like an outsider looking at how people are playing would be maybe the maps are a little bit boring. And I honestly don't know like how you would go about fixing that because of the way abilities work, because that's actually like by design sometimes.
Other than
but,
announcing
I mean,
they're adding a fourth map at launch.
Yeah,
Sorry, I should have mentioned that as well.
Yeah, you did. You did. You said a map and
I did.
and
Okay,
a new
pardon
agent.
me.
Yeah. Which I mean I think that's honestly enough for people who have been playing it for a while, and then you can just kind of continue to build and coast off of the success. This is going to seem like a lot softer of a launch than something like Overwatch, for example, where they came out and they were like very rigid about, we're launching this, we have a franchise system in a year, we're doing all of these World Cup event like region by region, and the finals were at BlizzCon that year. So I think like they do want it to be softer, and that does mean that it might not seem as like, whoa, super massive. I feel like we kind of already had that moment with the open beta, to be honest. So I mean, I like it. I like that we're getting this new content to dig into for those of us that have been playing through the open beta. And I think for people coming in, it's not going to be so much stuff going on that it's overwhelming, right? Especially if they're coming in from the League of Legends side and have not played a tactical shooter like CS before.
That's a good point. Just the idea that it will have an easy point of entry. There aren't too many agents, right? There's going to be 11 agents, I believe. So there's not too many that it's going to be overwhelming. That's a very good point. So like it's a very manageable game for somebody who's coming in for the first time, who was not part of the closed beta, to be able to experience this. It's in thinking about it, actually, I really like that point. Like I think it is the right sized game, right? I think it's the right sized game for a new player to pick up. I think that it has enough meat to it such that there's enough to discover, right? And enough to enjoy for probably 30 or 40 hours before you start to wear out of it, right? Which is a fair amount of time. And probably by that time, players get to that point, we're probably going to see new things in the game anyway.
I mean, that's the point that they talked to me yesterday about, is that they want a consistent content pipeline where it's not going to be some games where you go 6 months without any new developments. They want a continuous, flow of skins and missions and contracts and battle passes and agents and maps and game modes. They want this to be something where every few months there's something to look forward to. There's events, just very similar to League of Legends, where you have, maybe 4 to 5 new characters a year, new game modes, new events, new skin events similar to that. So I am cautiously optimistic about it. I mean, one of the big things that I wanted to talk to them about was the rank system, which I think is another sticking point for a lot of players going into launch, where they want a better rank system, where right now, I agree with this too, because as someone who's coming this from the esports side, where I am watching Corey, and I'm watching Sinatra, and I'm watching Shazam, and I'm watching these players, watching, Player One, who are all, Valorant, Immortal 3 players, I want a leaderboard. I want to know who the best Sage player in the world is. I want to know who the best Breach player in the world is. I think, in terms of Breach, Hiko's the best. But I want the actual data, right? I have the pro games to look at, the few tournaments we've had who are, semi-serious or serious tournaments. I can see from that, like, oh yeah, Hiko's the best Breach. But I actually want, because, Charlie 5, 6, 7, I see a lot of names, in the Valorant ranking who are total unknowns. And we have no real stats on them, no real things that we can really look at that and compare them to the, the more relatively, known names. So I talked to them, I was like, is there going to be a leaderboard system? Because I want a leaderboard system. People want a leaderboard system. People want, better tracking and stats of how they're progressing. And they did agree that, ranked is not, perfect. It's not going to be like this forever. That by launch, it probably won't be. I don't believe at launch, ranked will be enabled. It might take, a few days to a week or 2 weeks for, game, like, not just go full into ranked. But I feel like by, the end of summer, we will have a much different ranked system. If not ranked system, a different way of tracking things. Yeah. And I think that's what people want, is that they want the leaderboards, they want the progression, they want a better ranked system. And it's right? Like, this is a 200 development team. This is a group of people who are listening to the community and want to have this game grow with the community. And that's why the second game mode is in beta, right? Where the second game mode is totally a test mode. They want to see how players react to it. If it sucks, they're going to cut it and go to something new. If they like it, they're going to progress with that and make it better. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I still think they could have waited until, July 7th or the end of July or whenever China, gave the thumbs up to have a full-on blowout release. But I'm going to trust them because so far they have almost 3 million players playing daily. And that's now. Impressive. That's 2 months into beta where they have 3 million players around the world, excluding China and Oceania, playing this game, which is incredible.
And think about how thankful we are whenever release dates get bumped up, especially in these extraordinary times, right? So I'm sure there's a lot of people who have wanted to get their hands on this game and haven't been able to get into the closed beta saying, thank goodness it's sooner than later. I'm going to be able to enjoy this game like everyone else. Maybe I have a friend or two that's already in the closed beta. So the game will officially release on June 2nd. And I know in esports, we love our announcements of announcements. So I will say this, on June 1st, here on our ESPN Esports Twitch channel, we're going to have a lot going on. Believe me when I tell you, there will be a lot going on. That's all I'm going to say for now. But keep your eyes peeled. Follow us on Twitter as well, ESPN_esports, for perhaps some upcoming announcements June 1st here, twitch.tv/ESPN Esports. Emily, it's time for you to gloat. It is time for you to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
My boys,
the floor is yours because the Solari Cup has concluded. And yes, you have been singing the praises of Fish 1, 2, 3. And guess what? Victorious they are on the map.
I called it. I totally didn't think they'd actually beat Prodigy, but they did. I mean, just because, like, when you think of the names and when you think of who has been really successful in Europe thus far, I think Fish 1, 2, 3 are a really interesting example of who is now the best team in Europe, right? Because, like I said last week, these are primarily British CS players who were never really at the top of CS, right? And Great Britain is, I mean, I think of Call of Duty first before anything really when I think of the UK and any sort of esport, but that could also just be me. It's a small market, right? And it's a really cool story to see these guys do so well right off the bat. I think and we kind of talked about off camera about this. I'm not going to go through their like Solari Cup win like exactly, but I do want to talk about what this means for Europe, because I think this could be a really cool opportunity to pick up a bunch of players that are obviously like very eager to learn, work really well together, are at the top of the game currently, and hopefully try to build on that. So hopefully a European organization can take a look at these guys and be like, hey, we want to take a chance on this as our as our Valorant team instead of going with big names, especially since a lot of big names aren't really making the swap over in Europe. I'd really like to see these guys succeed, and I am pleasantly surprised at their Solari Cup win. I was like, wow, they actually did it, you know. But yeah, it was. I recommend people go back and watch that too, because their match with Prodigy was really close and really interesting. So people should go back and watch that just generally.
And Tyler, you actually sang the praises of Scream on Team Prodigy, calling him the best European player in Valorant right now.
Yep.
What is the future of Scream? What is the future of Mixwell and Team Prodigy?
In terms of just raw talent, I mean, I think no one's going to disagree that Team Prodigy has more high ceiling players than Fish 123. Maybe in time, if Fish 123 does get that, you know, that big org signing, you know, a Fnatic, a G2, a Mad Lions, a Misfits, those, you know, a European org picks them up and they give them the right structure to grow into that ceiling and kind of build them up. But like compared to like a Mixwell or Scream, who've, you know, been through the ringer, who've been in Tier 1 CS, who've been playing around the world for years and years, it shows. And Scream, I think, is one of, if not the best player I've seen in the beta. He's up there with, you know, the Braxes, the Lieges, the Hikos. He is really smart. It's not just his aim, which is nutty. His aim, if you watch any of his series, is you know, it's CS proof. It's Tier 1 CS proof. But it's his smarts. He's really smart about the game. He plays Sage. His walls are some of the most ingenious walls I've seen. He, you know, from just blocking off sites to getting the right angles to just playing the character kind of perfectly in my eyes. I really think Scream, in a pool of a very slow moving pool in Europe, where we're going to talk about this later, you know, NA versus Europe and kind of how the infrastructure is growing in both regions. If you're a G2, if you're a Fnatic, if you're a team in Europe who wants to build a Valorant team, Scream is the number one guy. I would get Scream tomorrow. He is at the top of the game. He seems very motivated to do well. He's smart. He understands the game really well. And I think the sky's the limit for him. And I think Mixwell as well, who I think going into the beta, I actually thought Mixwell would be in that Scream place of being the number one European player. And he's had off and on games where he'll have a game where he'll get 25 kills, 30 kills, and just destroy on the operator, and he'll just mow people down. Then he'll also have games like in the Fish 1-2 series, the Fish 1-2-3 series, where he kind of looks off and he's just not communicating with the team well. And I think that might be more on just the Team Prodigy of it all, where Team Prodigy is very much a team made up of superstar players, and one of their players was not even, you know, allowed to play in the semifinals or finals, and we'll talk about that very shortly. But Team Prodigy has a lot of players that they want to go pro in Valorant should be picked up, and Scream's at the top of the list. I think Scream is an amazing talent in Valorant, and I think he's a player that, you know, I know a lot of people are saying, you know, the old school CS players might have a year or so before getting, you know, kicked out of the Valorant scene by some younger players, but I think Scream actually has a chance to be one of the forefront of the European Valorant scene for a while. So someone pick up Scream. If not already, please pick him up. He's a very good player.
I wonder how many organizations are looking at Dafran right now. That's who you were talking about. And we're going to get into it. Let's get into it immediately, because that was definitely the drama surrounding this tournament, was Dafran and basically his antics, Emily. What? I mean, let's make it clear that he has competed, right? He was an Overwatch pro at Atlanta. He's competing here, but like, he doesn't need esports, right? He doesn't need to be right.
Not now, no.
And I think so. The thing with Dafran, and I think again we're kind of talking about this before the show, but I'll reiterate here. Like, he is. I mean, a lot of people might get mad at me for saying this. Like, a lot of his problems are relatable, right? Like, he's the kind of person who's going to get really mad at himself if he's performing badly, even if the rest of his team is doing well, right? And he's winning. And I think, to the point of like a tactical shooter, sure, you can pop off and like drag your team pretty far, but I still think that more than anything, the most important thing in Valorant is really going to be like teamwork and communication. And it's just like insanely important for a game like this because you need to be calling out where people are. And sometimes your job is going to be to die, like, right? Like you're just going to be going in and you're the entry fragger and you might just die. And that's your job. Your job is to open up the map for the rest of your team, right? So they can rush into site and plant. And I think that someone like Dafran is always going to have this weird like mental push-pull between how well he's performing individually and how much he feels like he's contributing to the team. He's a really volatile player to play with, despite the fact that I think his talent is undeniable. Like we're not talking about someone who is like, you know, like washed streamer category. This is someone who's like could easily be competitive based on his skill. But I don't think a competitive environment is good for him. He himself has said this. He's like, I don't have the mentality for it. It's very taxing on me mentally. It's very exhausting. And also like you can't go off on people sometimes, even if you want to. Like even if it is Solari Cup's fault, right? Sometimes you just have to take the L. Sometimes other people mess up and it's going to reflect poorly on you and it sucks. And no one wants to be in that position. But if you are in any sort of job, you kind of have to accept that that's going to happen sometimes. And Dafran is not the kind of person who will ever accept that.
And then now we find ourselves in this situation where he does completely unorthodox things during the tournament as a result of things that he couldn't necessarily control or contain. And
now
so
he's banned.
Now we have a player, like it's frustrating in a way, isn't it? Like we have a player with this immense talent who, let's be honest, that level of talent, he could absolutely be on a team and contribute and maybe even be the star of many organizations, right?
Yep, definitely.
But it may never be.
No, it won't be. No, it will never be.
It may never be.
Right? I think he himself has said that. Right? Like he's already said, I don't want to go pro. Like I don't want to be a part of a really professional, like kind of corporate buttoned up environment.
On one hand, you got to admire that, at least being aware enough to know that that's not his environment to be in. He would rather create content, and he'll be very successful at it because he's a charismatic guy, and he does very well when he streams live. I've watched his streams. He's very funny, right? But on the other hand, then you have this talent that you just wish you would be able to see and compare on a grand stage, but it's just not going to happen, so we just have to accept it.
Yeah, it's very similar to kind of Sinatra, and I think you can make a lot of comparisons between the two, and the two of them, go back and forth on Twitter, like they're friendly, they'll host each other, and Sinatra was very much in the same vein as Dafran a few years ago when he was on Team USA, I think 3 or so years ago when he was a 17-year-old and he couldn't play in Overwatch League. Yeah, I interviewed him, and I remember going into that interview, everyone was telling me, like, oh, this kid's toxic, he's the worst, He's vile. There's no way he's ever going to survive a year in the Overwatch League. He's not mature. And I talked to him, and he was a kid. He's a 17-year-old kid, and he was very open about his issues and how he raged on stream and he was toxic. And he said, "I'm going to get better, and I want to be the best player in Overwatch League." 2 years later, he is the world champion. Won Overwatch League MVP, won World Cup MVP, won the World Cup, and then he goes off to Valorant, and he wasn't. And he actually turned into a team leader, right? And I think the thing is, Sinatra wanted to change, and Sinatra wanted to be, at the top of this competitive scene. Where Dafran's 26 years old. He's not a 17-year-old kid. He's very stuck in his ways. He's an amazing talent. He's a great streamer, and he knows this. And I think I give him credit for that, right? Where if Dafran was, speaking about how I'm gonna go pro and I'm gonna be the best in the world, I'm gonna win the Valorant World Championship, and he was doing what he was doing right now, I would be, dunking on him. I'd be laughing at him. I would say, this guy has no chance of ever doing that. But he's self-aware. He doesn't want to be a pro here. He wants to be a streamer. He knows he doesn't have the mentality for it. He gets upset with himself in games where they're up 12-2. He messes up a Viper wall on Split, and he's like, I am so mad right now. I'm just going to start knifing people.
You mentioned that, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, and it's a thing of sure, that's hilarious on stream. I watched on stream as it was happening, and the chat's laughing with him. He's making a joke of it. After the game's over, he actually goes into a practice mode to show the people why he was so mad and why, his Viper walls and his Viper setups were making him so frustrated. And that's kind of the self-awareness that, you kind of like about Dafran, and how even in the face of being banned on Twitch, he still was like, no, screw this guy, screw that guy, screw him, screw them, I'm right. And you kind of respect that to an extent, where it's like, yes, he might be right in the grand scheme of things, or he might be partly right. But as Emily said, sometimes you got to take the L to get the, you lose the battles to win the war, where Dafran's not losing any battles. He got banned from Twitch and he went down off the ship. And give him some respect for that, but Valorant Pro, not going to happen. Great Valorant streamer on launch. If he's not banned, he'll be one of the most viewed, streamers on launch day.
100%. By the way, I know this is a tangent. Very, very quick before we go into the NA news. Sinatra, that's one of the biggest mic drops in esports history, right?
Him leaving?
Yeah, like him leaving Overwatch to go to Valorant. That's got to be like one of the biggest, if not the biggest, mic drop ever.
It's like kicking someone in the kneecaps. It's like kicking someone Overwatch League was already tilting, and then Sinatra just kind of kicked them in the kneecaps and made them fall in the face. Like it was like the Vince Carter dunk, Arda. The famous Vince Carter dunk.
Of course I know. Yeah, the Vince Carter dunk.
So Sinatra's the Vince Carter, and Overwatch League was the other guy that's getting dunked on. Like,
thank you for putting it into those terms. Appreciate it.
If Overwatch League doesn't rebound, and it doesn't have a long tooth, and it doesn't come back, and if it folds for whatever reason the next 2 to 3 years, people are going to look back at the Sinatra move as a significant reason why things started to go south. Even if, in the grand scheme of things, that might have not mattered at all, it'll be looked upon as, one of those big mic drop moments.
So we know we've been covering it all along on the website and as well on this show. Tons of organizations getting into Valorant. And at some point, we were looking at the organizations that were taking their time. Orgs like G2, for example, or ones that we haven't necessarily heard announcements from. Well, one of those orgs is Immortals, and they have finally made an announcement, and a very peculiar one, because their roster so far, they have made 4 signings. They sent out a tweet at 2 p.m. today, and these names are relative unknowns in the grand scheme of things. And I apologize if I get these pronunciations wrong. You have Bjor Lulu, you have JC Stani, you have Kohler 1337, and Gangsta. And then there's a 5th one here that's just a bunch of gibberish.
There's no 5th player. They're still trying that 5th player. Yeah, it's a placeholder 5th player.
Okay, so this strategy is not new necessarily in the terms of not finding star players, but does this speak to Immortals scouting? Like, what is this a testament to, Tyler, in your opinion?
The Gen G, right? It's the Gen G strategy of picking up, I believe 3 of the 4 players are from the Mountain Dew League in Counter-Strike, the Tier 2 scene, these hungry youngsters trying to come up. I think Stani comes from Overwatch and Apex. So it's, relative unknowns. I don't think any of them have over 1,000 followers on Twitter. So they're very, unknown players, very similar to the Gen G strategy, where they picked up 5, Tier 2 French-Canadian players. And now the French-Canadian players are kind of revered in the beta, where if you bring up who's the best in the beta, at least in North America, everyone brings up Player One and Incred and, Win and all these guys. And that one, Nerd Street victory, that 25K tournament has kind of propped them up and made them bigger names. I think Immortals is doing the same thing. And I haven't heard a bunch about, these guys. I actually did hear, I was talking to some of the players, and I was asking, give me some names. Give me some names of people. Don't give me the Braxes. Don't give me the Lieges. Who's someone you've met in, solo queue or in a scrim that's really impressed you? And one of the players who's a pro player told me, Bjor Lulu. He's like, that guy's team is really, really good. I don't know where they come from at all. They really surprised me. So that's when I first heard of Bjor Lulu about a few weeks ago. And now he's on Immortals, and this is a stack apparently that's been doing very well in scrims. I also know Immortals was in talks with Corey, who is now, I kind of think, the #1 free agent in North America right now, unless another big name Counter-Strike player moves over. I think Corey is doing really well. He's Valorant ranked in Valorant. which is, I know, we don't have leaderboards, so we can't really see like, oh, is he the 7th ranked Valorant or the 20th ranked Valorant? I don't know. He's doing very well, and I think people know his skill, and he's the anti-Dafran, where everyone loves playing with Corey, and Corey's a very great teammate. So Immortals was in talks with Corey, from what I've been told by multiple sources, along with some other organizations. It seems like an Ultra organization has offered him a very big contract, so I'm still following on that. So hopefully we can get Corey news in the next week or two. But Corey is a big name on the NA market right now, and I'm very excited to see where he goes, because I think Corey is going to be a superstar whatever team he signs with.
Emily, another organization that has entered into the Valorant space is Dignitas, and in a very, very peculiar way, actually. This is a very historic announcement for multiple reasons. Number one, this is an already established team and a world championship team. It's going to be Dignitas Female that remain together and also remain active in CSGO. So yes, there might be less, particularly with the pandemic, less CSGO events, but this does mean that they intend fully to remain active in both Valorant and CSGO. What was your reaction when you heard this news?
I actually think it's really cool. It reminds me of something that Fallen said on Jacob's Counter-Strike show, actually, the Eco, when he was talking about why he decided to do Flashpoint and ESL. And the reason for that is exactly like you say, right? Like with the global pandemic, things are a little bit looser. You're trying to find places where you can play wherever you can. We've talked a ton on this show about how it's almost like a one-to-one comparison, right, between CS and Valorant in terms of the strategy, with the abilities added obviously adds to the strategy of the game, but the fundamentals are effectively the same. I think a lot of things that you really need to pay attention to in CS, you need to pay just as much attention to in Valorant. Particularly gun economy is still super, super important. So I think a lot of this skill will translate. And if they feel like it'll help keep them as sharp as possible, I mean, it's a great opportunity, right? You're just trying to enter as many things as possible as a team. And the openness of CS naturally, because it's not nearly as a restrictive esport as something like League of Legends or Overwatch or something with a franchise system. And because Riot has already said for Valorant, they do want to keep it open for the first year at least. I think it's great. I think it's, again, exactly the same reason why you see a CS team choosing to be in both Flashpoint and ESL at the same time.
Yeah, this is a great announcement. And like we said, a Dignitas Female will compete in CSGO and Valorant at the same time, making them the first pro team to do that across multiple esports titles, and also the first all-female team to compete in Valorant. Of course, they are world champions 2 times in CSGO. I had a chance to catch up with Captain Emilite and Thea in an interview that you can find in full at youtube.com/ESPN Esports. Here's a clip right now. Going back to the competing in multiple esports, I find that fascinating. I really do. We don't see many multi-sport athletes, esports or otherwise, in history, right? And I really wonder, I know you mentioned, that you put together the schedules and you're going to make sure that there's, time for breaks, etc. But this sounds very exhausting to me. I know I'm not in it, but I'm wondering, how will the team be able to juggle that for a long period of time, especially with the amount of practice? I would guess Valorant more than CSGO. You guys are already very well established in CSGO, but the amount of practice and prep needed to compete at the high levels like you do, I imagine is daunting for one title, let alone 2. So what have you thought of when thinking about this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that I definitely didn't want to follow Shanghai Dragons. I know that they really drain their players and over practicing and playing too much. Um, so luckily, um, we know our abilities. We know what we can and can't do. And when you're so passionate about something that you do, and we love our work, we love what we do, which is competing and gaming, it becomes easy and it's not really too daunting on us. And like I said, we all realize that we have to sacrifice some time with our friends and family, but we want this win and we want to get better more than anything. It's something that we're so passionate about. So having off seasons is something that would be really important, just like with a regular job with traditional sports or anything that you do, there's off seasons. So that gives them an opportunity to take breaks from practicing so much. So that's something that will kind of follow is a schedule similar to traditional sports.
Let's talk about the transition. A lot of people talk about CS:GO as the natural progression based on, the economy system and the structure of the game. But in particular, are there any similarities with the mechanics, the gunplay? Like, what other things other than the obvious, Emily, makes it easy for a CS:GO pro to transition to Valorant?
Yeah, Valorant is similar to CS:GO in a sense that it tests your aim, it tests your communication. You really need to work with your team. And actually, funny thing is we noticed that we had Valorant practice before our CS:GO match, and Valorant makes you um, tap in a way that you can't in CS:GO, like you can't spray. So we played our CS:GO match and we're like, wow, it didn't mess us up at all. In fact, it made us shoot even better in our CS:GO match. So we're noticing that it won't make much of a difference for CS:GO players. And the great thing about Valorant is I think it's the game that's bringing all FPS game players together. We're seeing a lot of like Apex players, PUBG, Overwatch players that are coming to Valorant. So I think they could learn a lot playing Valorant from us CS:GO players.
So as I mentioned, the full interviews at youtube.com/ESPN Esports. And this certainly, that conversation of what kind of team works best for an organization, one that's already established, coming in as a cohesive unit, or a collection of superstars, maybe across multiple esports. That fits nicely to our next topic, which is the Elite Esports Rivalry Bowl North America. Why, you ask? Because some teams had great success. C9, for example. Other teams did not do so well at all. I am looking straight into the eyes of Sentinels. Lots of chatter about Sentinels, Sinatra and company. 3 different esports represented, 3 different titles represented on that team, and somehow in the losers bracket they fizzle out to an amateur team. Tyler, take us through C9's victory and also how Sentinels got upset in this fashion.
First off, I just want to give a big shout out to C9, even though it's Tens and Friends, where it was somewhat C9, somewhat a trial team. I think they are talking to some of those players. Hopefully, they can get all 5 of them signed because I think they played really well together. They have a really good structure. I believe Shinobi is the shot caller for the team, and Tens, as someone who's talked to him in interviews, he's a very shy kid. He's very introverted in a sense, and he's mechanically gifted to no ends. The reason why he switched to Valorant from Counter-Strike wasn't because he was washed or because he didn't have the talent. Everyone always saw him as the next mechanical god of NA Counter-Strike. It's just that he went to C9, it didn't work out, and he got frustrated and he left. Where I think, as shown in this tournament, his mechanical skill is bar none maybe the best in any region currently in Valorant. And to everyone who says Jett is not playable, Tens showed you this weekend that Jett, at the highest level, in the hands of someone with mechanical skills and actual hands, is very viable, especially on a team that's shot calling well and actually has communication. He had an average combat score of over 400 in the game against Soar. Over 400. I don't think we could play beginner bots. I don't think either of us would get over 400 average combat score. He popped off. He had 2 games in the tournament where he had over 30 kills. He only played Viper and Jett the entire tournament. No Sova, no Breach, no Phoenix. He primarily just played Jett and Viper the entire tournament, and he stomped every single game. The one game, his worst game, was the first game of the tournament versus Elite Esports, where he went 6-5-6, which looks really, poor, right? You must be like, oh, that must have been a pretty close game. No, Cloud9 13-0'd that game. It was not because he, didn't play well. It was just that the rest of his team got all the kills. Like, he wasn't able to boost up his score. So Cloud9, amazing debut. Like, right up there with Gen G's debut. Like, I think right now, if you look at, like, the NA hierarchy, I definitely think, like, this C9 team, if they stick around, Gen G and T1 are kind of the three big dogs in NA right now, with kind of Mousepaz in fourth place.
So Mousepaz was the only team that really gave Cloud9 some trouble. That was a 13-11 score in the upper bracket final. But Cloud9 basically cruised through this tournament at every other round. It didn't seem like they were ever in any sort of peril until they faced Mousepaz. So really, that was the only challenge of the day for them there. Meanwhile, Emily, we talked about Sentinels, and I mean, what do you say? What do you say? Like they
had a rough showing.
Why? How?
First of all, I just want to give a shout out to Team High Ground, who people may know from our tournament as Team Battlegrounds. It's a bunch of PUBG players. They actually did really well. They came through the losers bracket. So I think they're a testament to another stack that has kind of stuck around together and continued to improve. Obviously, Mousepaz is the Wardell stack that we've been talking about. But Sentinels, they I think it's not as super dire as people would like to paint it, I guess. The big loss that was more unexpected was the loss to Full Focus. I think this is a team that was designed differently than some of the other teams we're talking about, right? Like, we've just spent a bunch of time talking about Immortals approach. We've spent a bunch of time talking about the Gen G approach. To some extent, that's also the Fish 1-2-3 approach, right? Like, finding a bunch of players that you may not know from other games, but they're really good at playing together, and they've been really successful in this game, like, from the start. And I think Sentinels is the opposite, like, theory of roster building, right? Where they're pulling in players that are known quantities, they're obviously very mechanically talented in Valorant, and they're sticking them together on the same team. And Jacob kind of talked about the CS players on here, and we've spent a ton of time talking about Sinatra. So I don't think anyone doubts the skill of this team, right? I think it's just a matter of now we're finally seeing them trying to figure out how to play together, and Valorant is a very team-focused game. So I don't think it's like super, super dire. I mean, this is just one tournament, and I think that they'll like continue to improve the more they play together, but it's another testament to the fact that as people are figuring out the game, the teams around around the world that we're seeing do the best are even teams like we were talking about, like the Team Mirage. I always think of them as Team Mirage, but the Team Brax team that we saw playing together for a while. Obviously, they're not going to be playing together in Valorant officially as pros, but like I think you see people as they learn how to play together be more successful than bringing in a bunch of big names thus far, and that could change with time, right? Like, these guys have a ton of time to improve on their team chemistry and communication.
A few notes on why I think Sentinels didn't do so well, and I think there is actually, I know excuses are not the greatest thing in esports. But the team still has 4 of the 5 players who are they played again a fill-in Def, a CS:GO player from the United Kingdom, really good player. So it's not like they were playing with me or Arda or you, Emily, and then we had to like make up for all our mistakes.
We're just like a 4v5 every game.
Yeah, but I think the main reason why I think Sentinels kind of struggled in this tournament is because I don't know if you guys know this, but Sinatra played Sova the entire tournament, and he's only recently started to learn Sova. Like, right. he only really picked up, I believe, the agent a day or two before the tournament even started. Like, seriously started playing the agent. So this was his real first tournament where he was coming in playing in that Sova role, where he's usually been on that, Phoenix or, the duelist of, a Raze, where he really wanted to play Sova in this tournament. And I think the Sentinels idea was to have the quartet of Brim, Sage, Cypher, and Breach, and then you have usually the guess of a duelist or Sova, where they wanted to play more of the Sova role with the less of the entry fragger. So I think that was them kind of testing out a strategy where we might not see Sinatra on the Sova all the time. I think he wants to open up his agent pool, which is really good. I think this is the time that you would want to test out your agent pool, especially as the game goes into launch. You don't just want to be the Phoenix One trick, right? Because you never know. It's Riot Games, right? There's a definite possibility where Riot's just like, I'm going to gut Phoenix's core and he's going to be, useless.
And also, to your point, when you don't have your fifth yet, right?
Yeah.
Like, that means you can slot in anyone, the more versatile everyone else is.
And that's fair. That's fair, Tyler. I'm hearing what you're saying. Yes, picking up an agent and playing it in a tournament the next day, and in chat, actually, the Jukes Sidewalker said literally the previous day to this tournament, he was watching Sinatra trying to learn lineups from Dafran. So, like, I get it, okay? I understand. You're picking up a new agent.
What a crossover to bring everything together.
Yeah, I know. It's like Dafran, not so great teammate, terrific teacher, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how do you even explain that. But here's the thing. What it does do is it casts a little bit of doubt. And the reason is, I'm not saying that this team cannot be good. And I'm not saying that they're bad now. But what I'm saying is there is a little bit of uncertainty because of the fifth player not being there, because of all the players coming from different titles, because of the fact that they weren't a cohesive team going into the merger with Sentinels. There are a lot of X factors here. And yes, this is the time to play around. This is the time to experiment, for sure. But still, these are players with extraordinary playing ability. You know what I mean? Abilities aside, their aim is fantastic. Sinatra's one of the best FPS players out there, right? So the optics of this team losing to an amateur team, for all I don't know too much about the team they lost to, but I know that they're an amateur team. They, for all intents and purposes, might be a team that had never played in a tournament before. They might be a team who are just playing for the first time. I don't know the details, but what I do know is the optics don't look good. So now they have a little bit of a mountain to climb, so to speak.
Yep, the competition's only going to get tougher with bigger orgs coming in, more money, more teams getting funding. If a mouse pass gets on a team, or if a full focus gets a team, or the team high ground of all the PUBG guys. Venerated is one of the hottest names on the market right now. I've talked to a few players and I've asked them who's the best player in this in the beta, and they've said Venerated is right up there. And he proved it in this tournament. He was having some 30 bombs in some of the games. So Venerated is definitely a person to look on. And I do agree that Sentinels can get better, and I think they will get better, especially when they add their fifth and they get more time with more agents. But they are going to be the team where if them and T1 with the big names, if they don't do well early on in the first few tournaments and they get dunked on in front of thousands of people, there's going to be backlash, and we're going to have to see how Sentinels deals with the backlash if they don't get off on the right foot. But I'm still cautiously optimistic. I think Shazam's still playing really well. I think he's one of the best Breach players in the beta, at least in North America, and he's been very impressive. And I think the team overall, they all have talent. So I'm going to give them a pass on this one. Okay. But if the next tournament, if they go to the next tournament and they don't perform well, then we can dunk on them. Then we're going to do the hot seat. Who's on the hot site? Who's getting kicked? Who needs to get changed? We'll give them that pass. But next time.
I threw up a layup. It wasn't necessarily a dunk, just the layup to allow LeBron to block it on the board. Okay, that's what I did there for Sentinels. Really quick before we wrap, this is going to be the last topic here. Maybe one or two thoughts each here. NA versus EU. We've watched a lot of tournaments in NA, a lot of tournaments in EU. Yeah. Well, we don't have Asia to add to this conversation, right? No talk about the gap between South Korea and everyone else. Not here, at least right now. But when we're comparing NA to EU, Emily, when you look at this, starting with you, how do you compare the two regions? Who would you say has the advantage right now?
First of all, just to admit my own biases. My favorite team to watch right now is still Fish123. But that being said, I think what's going on is we're seeing a lot of more NA professionals from other orgs go into Valorant, which means that currently I think the mechanical talent pool is higher in North America. I also think that there's a lot more like large orgs in NA that are willing to take chances and pick up a lot of these big names and immediately make their foray into Valorant. Whereas I think in Europe it's going to be a bit slower for a few reasons I mentioned last show actually, which is that you don't see a lot of the like European Counter-Strike players moving over because they don't have to. Like they really love playing Counter-Strike. They're getting paid a ton of money to do so. They're not going to be spamming Valorant like even some of the top NA pros are. And then additionally, I think Europe is, or European orgs just in general, tend to hang back a little bit more and wait to see how the scene shakes out before immediately picking up people. I do really hope that someone picks up Fish123 and like gives them a chance to grow. That would be like my only kind of like beg moment to some European orgs. But I think for the most part, I see Europe still being better ultimately in Valorant than North America, with a few exceptions for a few reasons. One of them is just that PC culture is just so much more large in Europe. So once everything starts to catch on in Europe, and once more people are playing on the server and that kind of thing, you're going to see a lot more native EU talent just coming up. In my opinion, that's what we've seen in other games. I don't see why it would be any different here. So ultimately, in the long run, I believe in Europe, but right now I think NA is significantly ahead.
Tyler?
I agree. If there was a World Championship for Valorant tomorrow, I would be very assured that it'd be Gen.G, Cloud9, a T1 winning the title. Sadly, we're probably not getting a World Championship probably until next year at the earliest. So we're gonna have China, we're gonna have Korea, we're gonna have Brazil. Brazil, which I was talking to the devs yesterday, and I asked them. The numbers have been insane. 3 million daily playing this game. You've had every region has been higher than expected in terms of consistent turnout. And I asked them, like, if you had to pick one region that's really surprised you and really has, like, shown up. And Anna Donlin said that Brazil has been crazy with the game. And she is so impressed by how much Brazil has
Do we have numbers specifically for Brazil? Like, was that
no? They did not divulge numbers. All I was told is that they wanted Brazil. They thought Brazil could be a place where they could grow as a major region, and Brazil has come out and they've done more than enough to kind of show that they can be a major region to the same levels of an NA or Europe. I think the big problem with Brazil, as we've talked about before, is the infrastructure and getting money into the teams. But if it followed a similar route to like the CBLOL, where you have Flamingo and some of these soccer clubs picking up teams, I don't know why a Brazilian team can't be up there with the T1s and Gen.Gs of the world. But
if it continues to be an open circuit, you can push that team like as a Brazilian team gets good, like the Cade / Kaboom / Luminosity / whatever iteration Fallen's team was, like if they can go perform against better talent outside of Brazil, that'll also help too.
Yeah, but if we're talking about just NA versus Europe, I think right now I think even the staunchest European fan can't look me in the eye and say Europe's stronger. I mean, the second best team. Okay, so the best teams in Europe right now, you have Fish123, which is undisputed the best team. They're very impressive. You have Prodigy, which is if you listen to their comms, it's kind of a mess sometimes. You have Dafran knifing people. He gets banned, unbanned, banned again, unbanned, throwing some fill-ins here and there. Scream and Mixwell trying to carry the team when Dafran's trying to knife the Brimstone in the back. You have Ninjas. You have Ninjas in Pajamas, which is a Paladins team that switched over. Paladins, are arguably maybe the greatest esport ever invented. So they're. I'm not saying anything against Ninjas in Pajamas. I'm sure they're a good team. I'm just saying right now that NA is a stronger region, and I think for the foreseeable future, it's also because of the money, right? So there's a reason why Sinatra is switching, why Corey is switching, why some of these tier 2, the Tenses and the Foods of the world, who could have been, tier 1 players in CSGO have switched over. Sure. Where I think once we see the Fanatics and the G2s and the Misfits and the Mad Lions, the Astralises start picking up and bringing teams up and kind of growing them inside that, those incubators who have created such amazing teams in League of Legends, Counter-Strike, Dota, all in around the esports, it will become a much closer race. And I do think, as Emily said, that Europe will probably have the advantage when it comes to overall teams, where Europe might have 10 world-class teams and NA might have 5. But I don't think NA is going to be trounced like it has in League of Legends. I actually kind of have a belief that they can maybe, fight against some of the top regions. Maybe it's just because of this early launch beta, optimism I have, where in a year from now we're going to be doing the same show and, NA's out world, and it's going to be like T1 getting dunked by the 4th-ranked Korean team, and I'm going to be crying, which is totally possible. But for right now, I look at the landscape of NA, and I'm optimistic. Like, there's going to be more big teams, showing. Immortals isn't the last. There's going to be many more. I mean, there's the mysterious Corey team that's still out there. So hopefully, that's another big org.
That's their team name, the mysterious Corey team.
Yeah, yeah, that's the team. I've actually leaked it right here on the ESPN Valorant podcast. Is the mysterious Corey team is gonna win worlds. But right now, I'm pretty optimistic about NA. I think in a few months, as we get more tournaments and Europe builds up their strength, and Fnatic and G2 have to get in here sometime. I mean, they both ran tournaments for the game. They're both always on the forefront of esports in Europe. When those two big dogs get into the ring and more teams start investing, it's going to get really fun. The only downside is that, we're in a global pandemic, so LANs are not going to happen for a while. So we're just going to have a lot of regional tournaments, and then hopefully in 2021, Riot can host a big international tournament and NA can win.
What would be hilarious?
I was with you for the big international tournament part.
And then NA wins.
And then
I don't really care who wins as long as it's good play.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you know what would be funny if G2 announced their roster and it's Carlos coming onto the screen and he has somehow managed to poach like all the players that have been signed to other teams already? Like Brax comes out G2 jersey, and like I don't know, Sinatra comes out and throws the Sentinel. Like, I know that's not gonna happen, but can you imagine how on brand it would be if Carlos were to do something like that?
Like a revised EU is everywhere skit, but
I mean, to be honest, all EU has to do is to ask Astralis to just play. If they're like, hey, Astralis, just play
Can you imagine?
Just play Valorant like once a week, and then they'll be like, okay, they just win everything. That's actually possible, where it's like, hey, Astralis, you want some, an extra few $1 million just to play Valorant once a week and just destroy people?
God.
Which is, it will never happen. It'll never happen. I don't think it'll happen. I don't think we'll ever get to the point.
Fox in the chat said Astralis did and were garbage. Did they play on stream? Did they, Emily? Do we know this? Did they play on stream?
I don't know if they played on stream. I
want to know.
I've seen Simple on stream, and I think that's another thing is that it seems like while you have Liege and Stewie who have been playing Valorant a lot on stream. I remember in the boot camp, which was
a show match apparently. Yeah. It was an Astralis versus G2 show match. Okay.
And G2 found them? Nice.
Yeah, must.
So yeah. I'm thinking about back to the boot camp where I remember on the first day when we kind of all saw who was in the boot camp, and I saw Zaiwu, the Vitality, god himself, the best player in the world right now in CS:GO, and I was like, oh my god, it's over. This guy is about to just run over every single person in the European server. And obviously I was on NA for the weekend, so I didn't really know what was going on. But after the boot camp was over, I went over to someone who was in the EU boot camp, and I was like, "Oh my god, Zaiwu must have just destroyed everyone. It must have been a just hell on earth. He might have put up 50 kills every game." And they told me, "It's like, oh yeah, he played one game and quit. Like he played one game and quit." And that's the thing, right? Where it seems like a lot of the top CS pros in Europe aren't really jiving with the game, and it makes sense, right? Like when you're the top dog of CS. And this game has, similar CS gunplay, but it's a slower game, and you're making millions of dollars. There's no real point of playing Valorant unless you really, really like it. And it seems right now that mostly it's the American CS players who are kind of tying their wagon to this, and it might change in the future as the game continues to go and we see tournaments pop up. But I think right now NA's in the lead. and Europe will get better in a few months. And
yeah, I don't
Well-
think it'll change in the future with larger pros moving over. But
yeah,
to my point earlier, I think what will happen is just
New talent.
given the fact that EU is such a PC oriented like gaming culture, you'll end up just seeing a ton of people coming up the ladder.
And one thing that you have mentioned, Emily, on previous episodes is that perhaps the best Valorant players have yet to be discovered.
I'm standing by this.
Oh yeah,
And that's
I
a
mean,
very
that's
good
true.
point. And we
There's
will
three-
find out sooner
yeah.
than later, right? Because the official release of this game is much sooner than many people predicted. It will be on June 2nd. We have 12 days before this game is available to everyone. And just quick, we made an announcement earlier. We'll repeat that here. On June 1st, here on this very channel, you're going to see a lot. We'll leave it at that for now, but follow us on Twitter, ESPN_esports, for further information on what you may see
Ooh.
here as the release date approaches
Howdy.
on June 1st.
Valorant 2.
Yes, Valorant 2 will actually release before Overwatch 2 somehow.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
we will announce a Crucible show, is what.
Yeah, oof. Oof.
Okay,
You know-
before we go, very quickly, let's go around the horn and just talk about it. It doesn't matter what it is. Let's just take 30 seconds and talk about either something we're excited about or something we're keeping an eye on, particularly as we go into the next week and approach the release. Emily, let's start with you.
I think I said this last week too. I'm looking at Brazil. Like, I really want to see how, I didn't know that the numbers were so good, but I've been following some of the top like Brazilian streamers that have been playing this. I've seen a lot of the CBLOL casters like posting the fact that they made it to Valorant rank, or at least Immortal rank. So I'm just kind of following the Brazilian scene on the periphery, and that's where I've focused a lot of my time since, just waiting for it to get out in China so I can start following the Chinese scene as closely as I do LPL.
Tyler?
I think it's the point is that I agree that the best players we have not seen yet. I mean, I think the thing that really gave me the most optimism about this game is that there's 3 million average players daily right now. This isn't like 3 million, a month ago, or like 3 million a month. Like, the retention rate, I know there's a lot of noise and there's this game isn't perfect. This game is, IGN might say Overwatch is a 10 out of 10 game. Even though I love Valorant, this game is nowhere near a 10 out of 10. This game is still, growing into that score, and it's still growing into hopefully the peak game it can be. And they're fixing the problems, and it really shows me hope that there's people still playing this game. 3 million. There's people out there that we've never heard of who are grinding this game and who are going to be amazing at this game and who might be the next big, pro. They might be the next Tfue or the next Ninja or the next Faker. And I just can't wait to see those people pop out as the launch comes, because with so many people playing the game, we're going to get a lot of new stars, a lot of new personalities, and I'm very excited to see who's going to be, the first, king or queen of this game. And it's going to come. There's going to be a player who pops off and kind of establishes themselves as the top player in the world. And it might be, a Brax, it might be a Scream, it might be a Brazilian player, it might be, a 16-year-old Japanese kid. Who knows? And that's what makes esports exciting, and I cannot wait for Valorant to release on June 2nd to find out, who's going to be that player that kind of just takes our breath away.
I will end on this. In the interview that I did with Dignitas Female, with Emilite and Thea, they made a very interesting point about communication. We've talked about on this show how the developers have been very forthcoming with updates and decisions, decision making and why they did certain things, and very quick to respond. I mean, the solo queue criticism is a very good example there. The developers at Riot explained exactly why they wanted it that way, leaving the door open to possibly change that in the future. So, like, I do feel like there's been some really good communication between the developers at Riot and the general public in the closed beta playing this game. One thing that the Dignitas female players mentioned was CSGO is in a way following suit. It was notoriously the opposite in terms of communication with CSGO for a very long time. But as soon as this paradigm shifted, where people were getting used to the communication they were seeing from Riot, all of a sudden Valve started to give similar updates as a result. So what I like out of this is perhaps this is going to become the new norm, the standard. Maybe Riot is setting a standard here of a level of communication or continuing it to be able to say, look, let's be very transparent about some of the decisions that we're doing. What I hope happens is that it continues as we go into a full launch, because we are in a closed beta. So it is easier in a way to be able to do that, because you do have, even though it's 3 million people, you do still have a finite number. Like it's still in the early stages. So you're able to make those make that communication easily and start off on the right foot. What I hope happens is it continues as we go into launch, and we're not wondering what the thought process is in a year from now or a year and a half from now. So I'm going to say good start and hope that it continues. On that note, that's our ESPN Valorant show. We are on every single Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Myself, Tyler, Emily, and Jacob will join next week as we get closer and closer to that June 2nd date. And don't forget, lots of content here, Valorant related, on June 1st. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. We'll catch you next week.